What is up, guys? Ashton here, and we are back for another video. Sorry about that. Give me 1 second, we'll get started here. That was a strange intro. Alright, just gotta make sure that we're live, and then we'll get started here. Don't know if we're live. Let's check. Yes, we're live. Excellent. Alrighty. What is up, guys? Ashton here, and we are back for another video. Today we are going to be ranking every tier 10 in World of Tanks in this here tier list. If you guys remember last year, me and Marjorie Neatness did tiers all 1 through 10 tier lists on Blitz, but now I'm taking matters in my own hands, and we're going to do every single tank on PC, which is a whole heck of a lot more than Blitz. So, this is going to be a 10 episode live stream series when we do this. I'm thinking I'm probably doing it every, hopefully every week or so. But we'll just see. It just depends on if I have time to get to it. But here we are. We're starting off tier 10, going down to tier 1. So let's do it. Alright, so the first tank we got here is the RT62A. This is literally just the T62A. So we're going to get the T62A out as well. Let me find it first. T62A should be right here. Alright, so here we go. We got the T62A. This tank, it's a fossil. It's a living fossil. It's been in the game for pretty much the entire time, for over 10 years now. It's been a great tank, but over the past few years, it's been just absolutely tortured by the meta tanks, and it's just outperformed in pretty much every other aspect. It's got decent armor. I wouldn't say it's got the best armor. It's only got it's only got 100 in the front now. Wow, I remember when it was like 200 back in the day. But it has no armor whatsoever. Even if you go hold down, I mean, you're still able to pen this thing like crazy. It's got decent DPM, though, I'll tell you that. DPM on this thing is just over 3,000. You got pretty good pen at 264 because you have APCRs, your standard ammo, and you got 330 pen with the heat rounds, which is enough to butter through most tanks. It's not the fastest medium, though, let me tell you. It is only got 16 horsepower per ton and 50 top speed. And its dispersion is also not great for a tier 10 medium, but that's just your normal Russian medium. And it's got 400 view range, which is pretty standard for your tier 10 medium. So I'm gonna put this in meh, just because it's not standing the test of time in World of Tanks and getting overpowered by every other tank in the game. And if you know, it is 10 o'clock, so we may or may not be falling asleep by the time we're done with this video. So yeah, next up we have the 121, the WZ-121. This tank, it's literally the Chinese version of a T62A, just with a 122 millimeter gun. It's got pretty decent armor, a little bit better than the T62A. It's got 440 alpha, basically the same exact pen as T62A, although it does have APE rounds instead of APCR rounds. It's got just under 3,000 DPM, but definitely with all the modules and stuff in the game now, you can definitely get that up there to over 3,000. It's got a decent top speed actually. Not the best horsepower per ton. Got actually really good health for a tier 10 medium at 2050. And then its shell velocity is also really good for a 122. And overall, this tank is one of the better tier 10 mediums. It just performs a whole lot better, in my opinion, than the T62A. So I'm going to put this in the good tank category. All right, the 121B. This is the tier 10 Chinese premium. This thing, man, on Blitz, this thing is absolutely broken and strong, but this is literally just the 121, except just we got a 105 gun. It's basically the British L7 gun, which is literally the British L7 gun, just Chinese. Same armor, same everything about it, just a little bit less health, 100 less health, probably about the same exact speed. But it's got some of the best view range in the game, let me tell you. So this tank, I'm gonna put. It's got better DPM. That's because it's got a 105. But I'm gonna put this thing in strong. It's not broken because there's still meta tanks in the game, but this thing is really good. Do we have to talk about the AMX 30B? It's just one of the worst tanks in the game, tier for tier. This thing has no armor. It's got really poor DPM for a tier 10 medium. Terrible, terrible pen. I mean, only thing it really does have going for it is how fast it is. Other than that, you got nothing. Look at this dispersion, 30.35. Just absolutely terrible. And its shell velocity it's all right, but there's much better choices. To be honest, I'd play a Leopard 1 over this thing any time of day, and the Leopard 1 is still not a great tank. So AMX 30B, it's French, it's fast, it's got no armor. You know where it goes. Absolutely garbage. Here we go, the Batinogle Chatillon 25T. This tank is one of the OG Frenchies. This thing has a 6-shell autoloader 105 gun, which is absolutely amazing. It's got 259 pen, much better than the AMX 50Bs. Also has way better shell velocity. Its dispersion is also pretty decent for autoloader, at least. It's .36. Look at that clip damage. 1950. That is insane. And then you also have a top speed of 65 with a power to weight of 30. This thing makes it very, very agile. And then not to mention, it also has 1800 health for a light/medium tank. No armor though, it's French. But this thing is amazing. You got 2.73 intraclip for a 5-shell clip. It used to be 6 shots actually, I believe. But before they nerfed it and got rid of a shell, but still, that doesn't mean it's not good. And that's actually really good DPM, judging by the fact that it's 39-second reload. So yeah, this tank, I'm putting it in strong. It's stood the test of time, and it still performs really well at tier 10. All right, next we have the Carro de Combattimento 45T. This tank is literally the Progetto with just a little bit more armor, a bigger gun. It's got a 120 millimeter gun, I believe. Yes, it's got 400 alpha. It's got 4 shots. Its intraclip is 6.2. Actually, no, my bad. 4 seconds. I was reading the rate of fire. This thing has 10 degrees of gun. 9 degrees of gun pressure, which is still really good. You also have 1,600 damage potential with this 4-shot. Oh, excuse me. As you can tell, the time is growing late, and I'm getting tired. But we're gonna push through. This thing has much, much better turret armor than the Progetto. As you can see right here, this is just fit on flat ground. Look at that upper pull. It's pretty dang good at ricocheting. So once you angle this thing, use its gun depression, this thing is a beast. Yeah, you got that little bit of able to pen on the gun mantlet, but you still have a good thing going for it. and then that cupola up there is hidden pretty much. But you really got to hide this lower plate because you only got 160, even 70 millimeters of lower hull armor, which is easily able to HE if you have a big giant gun. But this thing actually can somewhat side scrape. But you see back here you got this little triangle wedge where you can pen it. Other than that, it's all right. It's not the quickest, but then again, it is pretty mobile for being a Italian medium. It's got decent HP. It's got pretty poor dispersion, not gonna lie. But other than that, it's a pretty decent tank. I don't think it's as good as the Bat Chat, so I'm gonna put it in good. Next we have the Action X. Yeah, we got the Centurion Action X. This thing is just a better FV4202, but in all honesty, it's just a little bit better than the Centurion 7, just at tier 10. I just don't recommend playing this thing. It's not good in any aspect, really, besides, maybe it's DPM and the fact that it has Hesh rounds. But other than that, this thing is just lackluster. It's got really poor DPM for a tier 10 medium. It's got decent accuracy. It's got decent accuracy, decent shell velocity. It's for how big it is. It's pretty quick and mobile. But it's got just no armor. You can butter through this tank so easily. I mean, look at this thing. Put this on live. You can just butter through any part of this tank. Even when you're flat, you can pen this upper turret. And even if you go hold down, you still have these really weak cheeks on this thing. And not to mention, you also got this upper plate, which you really can't bounce off of, and you're just shooting all premium rounds. So it's really lackluster in that category. So I'm going to put it in meh, to be honest. So, all right, next we have the CS63, the Polish tier 10 medium. This thing has the boost mechanic on it that enables it to go 70 kilometers an hour, believe it or not. This thing is very, very quick, which gives it up to 1150 horsepower, making it one of have some of the best horsepower at tier 10 for a medium. It's got not the greatest DPM, but it has good penetration because then you got those EPCR rounds as well. Dispersion's not great. Its aiming time's all right. Shell velocity's all right. But the speed is where it's really at in this tank. It just goes so fast, especially with that boost. But this thing has really no armor. It's basically a light tank. So if you just go right here, watch it live. I mean, yeah, you can get some ricochets off its turret and stuff, but once you go hold down, after you use that boost mechanic, the turret becomes a whole another story, because look at that. You still can just butter right through this turret, even if you're going hold down. It's just not ideal. But on the move, if you're driving diagonally, you can get some pretty troll bounces off the front, and it's got 2,000 health for a tier 10. View range is alright at 400, not the greatest, but not the best, not the worst. But yeah, so this tank, I'm gonna put this tank in balanced. I would put it in good, but it's just got really no armor. All right, E50M. Man, this tank, it's always been that tough thing for me, because it sometimes it's just absolutely broken, and then some other times it's just garbage. It's got really, really bad DPM for a tier 10 medium. It's got only 2,500, which is really poor, but it's got some of the best dispersion, and same with on moving dispersion as well. It's got some of the best on moving. for a tier 10 medium. It's got great shell velocity, and it's really fast. This thing is about 70 tons almost, and this thing is just so quick. It goes 60 kilometers an hour, and if you put turbo and stuff like that, this thing can go almost 70, believe it or not. And it's got 1,268 horsepower, making it the best horsepower medium at tier 10, actually in the game. And then it's got a decent power to weight ratio of 20, but its tank traverse is where it's lacking. If it had better tank traverse, it'd be like the Panzer V4, where you have just absolutely crazy traverse and able to ram everything. But you got 8 degrees of gun depression, which is plenty enough for this tank. Because, I mean, look at this armor. I mean, yeah, on flat ground it's not the greatest, but once you go hold down, watch this. Look at that. It's a great hold down tank, especially on ridge lines. Yeah, you got a little bit of a chance of penning down here, but it takes a miracle sometimes to pen through the cheeks of this turret. But it also has... Sorry, I just heard a noise. One sec. We got 2,050 hit points, one of the best hit points at tier 10 for a medium. And then it's got decent view range, but the only thing that's really terrible about this tank is its DPM and then how big it is, because this thing is the biggest medium at tier 10. So you're getting shot by everything because they can see you as a big threat. Because when you ram this thing, it feels so good. You can do like 700 rams sometimes, even to heavy tanks. It's crazy. So this thing I'm gonna put in. Let's put it in good. We're gonna keep it good. Yeah, let's keep it in good. Put the E50 in good. Next, you have the FV4202. So this is basically a Centurion Action X, just a little bit lower to the ground and a little bit faster, but other than that, there's really nothing different about it, but since it's a little bit better than the Action X, I'm going to put it in balanced. The excuse me, the K91. Oh, this tank is something else, guys. You got actually 9 degrees of gun depression, but only 5 over the front. This thing has legit no armor. No stinking armor whatsoever. Look at that. You can butter through the upper plate on this thing. It's that bad. And you can even pen right here where the tracks are. So if you just shoot the tracks right here and just pen right through the tank. And then this thing is very long. It's also a rear turreted tank destroyer with not tank destroyer, a medium. But look at this. You can't turn the turret all the way. It's like a T-28 prototype. You can't turn the turret all the way, which makes this thing so bad. And then this thing also, it's got alright DPM, but it's got 276 pen, which is some of the best penetration for a tier 10 medium. Got pretty alright accuracy, the best shell velocity for a medium. But this thing is very, very sluggish for a medium because of how long it is. And then, as you can tell, no armor whatsoever. It's got alright health, alright things, but this thing just is outperformed by every other tank. If this thing actually had a front-facing turret, it'd actually be pretty good, but I'm going to put the K91 in sucky. Next, we have the Leopard 1. So it's better than the 30B, but it's literally the 30B except German. This thing has terrible DPM. They just buffed its gun to have 420 alpha, which I don't know why they did that. It doesn't matter. It's still going to be a bad tank. Excuse me. One of the fastest medium tanks at tier 10. But also some of the lowest health at 1850. But it's also got pretty dang good horsepower per ton, really good dispersion, especially on movement. You got 0.41 with on movement dispersion. got 9 degrees of gun depression with this thing. It's all right. It's got decent pen, but everything about it just makes it sucky. Next up, we have the Lion. This is going to be probably a new reward tank here pretty soon. It's basically the Caro Combat Demento, but it's got a 105 millimeter gun with 420 alpha. It's got the reserve shell mechanic, also like the Italian tank destroyers. You got 1680 clip damage. Whew, gotta stop yawning. 4.5 second aim time, pretty dang good dispersion. But with on movement, it's not the greatest, but still not the best. Also, it's got terrible shell velocity. It's pretty dang quick. Just the horsepower per ton's a little bit lackluster. Like the Caro, it's really got no armor besides a little bit in the turret, which really doesn't matter. And then it's just got alright view range. But look at that. That turret looks exactly like a Leopard 1's if you see it. I think this tank is based off a Leopard 1, just Italian modelized. So if you look at this, you can just see that it's got alright armor for the turret, but if you load APCR, you can butter right through that turret. So watch this. You load APCR, yeah, you can butter right through the turret cheeks on the mantlet. And then this thing, if you want to go hold down, you have to stay hold down, or else you can't bounce anything with this, because look at that upper plate, just 70 millimeters. If you shoot this thing head on, you can probably pen it with HE even. And then the back, got 25 millimeters in the back. You're just penning that through that with ease. So I'm going to put this a little bit lower than the Caro, just because I feel like it's not going to perform as well because it's got a little bit less armor. But the gun probably will feel great. Next, we have the M48A2 T54E2 T95 T123E6. This is the M48 120 millimeter. So it's the Patton with the 120 millimeter gun. This thing, it's literally a T10 E5 and a Patton mixed together. It's got the T10 E5 gun, just a little bit better DPM. It's got that gigantic. Excuse me. Oh man, I don't know if I'm gonna make it through this video. It's got a gigantic cupola here, which you easily can get through this thing. And then it's just got Patton hull armor, which is not great. It's also got terrible dispersion for a medium, very slow for a medium. 2,000 health is actually not too bad, but it also has only 400 view range. It's got 10 degrees of gun depression, which is decent, which is pretty standard for American medium, but it's just nothing impressive. So this thing, I'm gonna put it in meh, because I don't enjoy it really. Next, we have the M60. Is that the M60 or no? That's the M48. The M48A5 Patton. This thing is your Tier 10 Tech Tree American. This is got much better DPM. You actually have your standard is APCR in this thing. You're a little bit slower than the 120, but you got a little bit better turret armor though. It's got the same amount of health. It's got pretty bad dispersion for a Tier 10 medium. Your shell velocity is alright, but this thing only has 9 degrees gun depression now, but it's got some of the better view range in the game. But other than that, this thing is also going to go into balanced, because it's just your OG American medium. Now we have the M60, literally the same exact thing as the Patton, although there's one key. This thing goes 60 kilometers an hour. It's got a lot less hull armor than the regular old Patton, and a little bit less DPM. Same health. You got 420 view range, same exact gun depression, same accuracy. Actually, no, a little bit better accuracy. But that 60-kilometer-hour top speed just makes it feel really nice. But other than that, it's literally just the Patton. But I'm gonna put this thing in a good tank. It's a little bit better than the Patton in my opinion. So, all right. Next we have the. Is that the? What is that? That is the fourth. I think that's the. Actually, it's the 140. Yes, that's the. All right. We had the Object 140. Like the T62, this thing is basically the T62. There's really nothing really different about it except that its armor is a little bit better. It's a little bit better in a sense. It's got pretty much the same exact DPM. It's got pretty much the same gun, same speed. A little bit faster than the T62. Pretty much the same health, same accuracy, all that stuff. It's literally the same tank. Just can't keep up with today's meta, so I'm gonna put it in meh. All right, next we have the Object 430B. This tank is absolutely nuts. Although it does not have good pen, once you have to load premium on this thing because it's only got a tier 8 gun, but if you load premium on this thing, you still have 3,800 DPM in this thing, which is absolutely outrageous. Its armor is not the best, but then again, it's not the worst. You have 5 degrees of gun depression, which is pretty typical for a Russian medium. So you're not really going to bounce anything off this pike nose because it's more like a Skoda T50's pike nose where it has really no armor on that thing. But you get this thing on a ridge line or behind like a pile of rubble, this turret is really, really good. And then also you got these really trolley side armor plates that are curved in. So if you're angling even just a little bit, like look at that, you can just bounce anything. So coming around a corner, per se, like this, coming around a corner, you got to aim for right around here. Otherwise, you're just going to be ricocheting off this thing. But it's pretty much the same thing as the T62. Just got a pike nose. Dispersion's a little bit worse, but your view range is the same. You got 2,000 hit points. You got 54 degrees of tank traverse. Your aim time is 2.2, which is pretty dang good for a Russian medium. So I'm gonna put this thing in good tank. I'm gonna put this in good tank. It's not. It's basically the WZ. Just actually no. We're gonna put it in strong. We're gonna put this thing in a trunk. Yeah. All right. Next we have the 430U. The Object 430U. This thing is a beast. This thing it's got a 122 millimeter gun that the IS-4 has, as well as the 277 has a 130. But it's got the same gun as the IS-4. It's got pretty dang good pen. 340 on the heat rounds, which is absolutely crazy. Its turret armor is ridiculously good. Look at this thing. You put this thing hold down with this fight. It's only got 5 degrees of gun depression, but once you put this thing hold down, look at that. You cannot pen this thing at all unless you're loading gold rounds. And this thing has .36, which is pretty standard for a 122, so it's not great. It's got 55 top speed, 2,000 health. View range is pretty typical. But this thing is literally just a better. This is this is one of the meta mediums nowadays. But I don't find it broken, but I do find it really strong. So I'm also gonna put I'm gonna put it in strong. Now we have is that the we got the 907 and the 907A. The 907 and the 907A. I'm not sure if there's really a difference between the two. Actually, let's go to the comparison. We're going to check the 907 versus the 907 2. Alright. Object 907. And then add the 907 2. 907A. You know what I mean? Yeah, there's literally no difference between the 907 and the 907A. But here it is. You got the 907. It's literally just the Object 140 but this thing has much trollier armor. I mean, look at this thing. As soon as you use that 5 degrees of gun depression, you got to use. You still have really trolly side armor, as well as the cheeks of this thing. Because look at that, it's like a spaceship. So if you're shooting anywhere under here, it's gonna get absorbed. You can bounce pretty much anywhere off this tank if it's angled perfectly. It's got alright DPM, pretty much the same as your T62 and 140. Got APCR. You got 55 top speed, 2,000 health. It's got pretty bad dispersion compared to the other ones at 0.35 compared to like 0.32 and 0.34. Got pretty much the same exact view range. So this thing, it's gonna be I'm gonna say it's balanced. It's not as good as say the Object 430s, but it's definitely better than the T62A and the 140. So I'm going to put this 907s here. All right, next up we have the Progetto. The Progetto M4065. This thing is the auto-reloading Italian medium. This thing is one of the best mediums in the game. It has a force shell thing. It's basically got the same exact DPM as the Caro. Just it's got a 105mm gun. It's got a little bit better pen. It's really quick for medium at 65. It just really doesn't have any armor besides a little bit in the turret. But that dispersion is pretty decent for auto reloader. Excuse me. It's got 400 V range, 9 degrees of gun depression. Which is pretty good because this upper plate can be really trolly at times, even though it's only 50 millimeters thick. But if you angle this tank right, you can actually take a couple bounces here or there. But soon as you overexpose this thing turns into absolute butter, and you can even hesh it sometimes with say an FE 4005 or something. But I'm going to put the Progetto in. I'm going to put it also with the Caro just because it's a good tank, but it's not the best. Next up, you got the STB-1. The STB-1. Here we go. STB-1 is one of those tanks that is forgotten, but it is absolutely amazing. And I did not know this. They have made it into a siege mode tank. Wow. I didn't realize this since the last time I played. Wow. This just makes this tank even better now. Because, I mean, look at that. Now you can really, really troll in this tank now. But those 35mm plates right here are really what takes it out of really god tier mode. But this thing's got really good pen at 330 for a medium with heat. Its DPM's absolutely pretty good for a medium with a 105. 30.35 dispersion, not the best, not the worst. But this thing's not really mobile though, I'm gonna tell you that. Besides its turning and maneuverability, but it's just not that fast. But its turret armor is great. Its hull armor is sometimes trolly, but it can be penned pretty easily. But it's got 2,000 health. And now apparently it has siege mode, so that just pumps it up a whole other tier for me. So we're gonna put this thing in strong. Otherwise, I would have put it in good tank had it not had siege mode. The T22 medium, the most OG of all reward vehicles in the game. This thing on Blitz is absolutely a beast, but on PC, this thing is just so lackluster. 0.36 accuracy, not fast. It's got no armor. Terrible DPM for a medium. It's got alright view range. Its power to weight's alright. But it's just so bad. I mean, look at this armor. I mean, yeah, you can if you're angling, if you're facing your enemy straight on, you can even pen like the tip of the pike nose. But even if you do angle this thing, you're peeking around a corner. You can't hide this. But yeah, you got those weird side armor plates, but that just doesn't make up for anything. It's just excuse me, it's just not a good tank. So I'm gonna put it in sucky. It's not trash, I'll tell you that. The T95E6. This tank is a tier 10 reward vehicle for them. Actually, did we get T62A? Oh, I didn't get the T62A. Oopsie. There we go. My bad. Actually, did I get both T62As? Okay, I did. Okay, my bad. We're good. T95E6. You got 120 millimeter gun. You got really good DPM for this thing. You got 2150 health. Its turret armor is really trolly. Besides, you got one of the largest cupolas in the game. It's got decent speed. I love how fast this tank is for American medium. It's got no side armor whatsoever, so you can be penned by HE. But its road wheels are so big that you really can take some heat rounds or rounds to them and just bounce them off. But you also got really decent on movement dispersion for a 120 millimeter gun. Not the greatest shell velocity, but with heat, you pretty much got the same thing. But it's just got much better pen at 340. It's got 2150 health, which is probably I believe it's the most for a tier 10 medium in the game. And it's got 410 view range. It's got 10 degrees of gun depression. This thing is just a overall really nice tank. And I'm gonna put this thing. It's pretty much the WZ of Americans. So yeah, the TVP T51. All right, this thing is the Czechoslovakian autoloader. This thing's got pretty decent pen for having an autoloader at 248. It's got 310 on the heat. You can dish out 1280 damage in about 4 seconds, which is really nice. It's got .34. It's probably the best aim time of the autoloaders. It's got 2-second aim time, which is really nice. It goes 60 kilometers an hour. It's got really good power to weight ratio. I really love how smoothly this thing runs. But the only thing really that's lacking for it has no armor, and it has probably some of the least amount of health in tier 10. I mean, just look at this thing. You cannot ricochet anything off this thing, even if you're using your 8 degrees of gun depression. I mean, still, you take any shell in this thing, and you're gonna have a bad day. But it's a great tank. I do recommend you guys try grinding for it, so I'm gonna put it in good. And for our last medium of the day, we have the Udes 1516. This thing is something else. It's a very, very interesting tank, I'll tell you that. I mean, look at this thing. It's a thing. It's just a weird thing. It's literally if you took a bat chat and just squashed it like a pancake, then you have this thing. It's got almost 15 degrees of gun depression. It's got 13 degrees of gun depression in siege mode, which, I mean, look at that. If you're poking a ridge line like this, look at that. There's no penning this thing. Even if you load heat rounds, you can't pen this thing. Now watch this. You also can have up to 25 degrees of elevation. Say you're looking, so you can be looking up on a tank like this, and you can't even do anything because you don't have enough gun depression to get down to this thing. But on flat ground, look at this thing. You still really cannot pen it. It's got a 120 millimeter gun. It's literally the Stridsvang, the Kranvang's gun, just on a medium and not an autoloader. It's got 440 alpha, APCR standard, that 254, which is really decent. It's got decent DPM. It's pretty quick for being how big this thing is. It's got alright health. It's dispersion. Oh, I already said dispersion's good. Its aim time's alright, but the only thing that's really wrong with this thing is its view range. But you easily can bump that up with modules and consumables and stuff. So this thing, I'm putting this in Stronk. It's not broken, nor is it bad. Alright, next up we have the AMX50B, or the AMX50BR as well. So let's take the AMX50Bs. This thing is just an absolute worst T57 heavy. It's French, it's big, it's really quick though. It goes 65, I think. Oh, actually, you can. I thought it was 70, but I guess not. But you got 2600 DPM, which is pretty alright. You got 1600 potential damage for your clip, 0.34 accuracy, which is not bad. But you just have no armor. You can even HE the turret, I believe. Yeah, like see right here, you can HE this turret easily. You got 80 millimeters up here, and then even if you go hold down this thing with 8 degrees gun depression, you have no armor. This thing is legit no stinking armor at all. The only thing I really like about it is how quick it is, and it's got really bad health for a tier 10 heavy at 2100. Like I said, some of the mediums at tier 10 even have more health than this thing. You got 400 view range, which is pretty dang good for a heavy. On console, this thing's actually a medium, believe it or not. But other than that, this thing is not good. I'm gonna put it in meh. You have much better choices, especially when you have the T57 and the heavy in the game and the Kranvang. Alright, now we have our faithful friend, the IS-7 and the IS-7R. The IS-7 it's very controversial. Like in Blitz, this thing is meh, but then it can be great. Otherwise, this thing is just, it has some of the best armor in the game, no doubt. This thing is one of the most OG Russian tanks in the game. It's been there since almost the beginning. If you get this thing on a ridge, you cannot pen it, even if you tried. And this thing has some of the trolliest side armor in the game, because you got some spaced armor in here, as well as really awkward angles and slopes. This thing has no DPM though, 2200, but it is quick. It is a quick heavy tank. It's almost 60. It's got really good health at 2400. Got pretty dang good view range. Poor accuracy at 0.38. Aiming time is 2.78, which is not great. And then shove velocity is also really bad. But this thing is one of those things where it's you like it or you hate it, and I don't really care for it, so I'm just gonna put it in balance, so that way I don't offend anyone by saying it's sucky or garbage. Next we got what is this? At the 113, I believe that's the 113. We have the WZ113 and the Beijing. I think the Beijing Opera is actually different than that. So let's actually go to the comparison. Let me make sure. Actually, that's medium tanks. We don't want mediums. We want this. And then add the Beijing Opera. I think they're. Oh, okay. They're just the exact same. Okay, I thought they were a little bit different. Probably thinking of the 111.5A and the Quillen. All right, the 113. This thing is a really good heavy. This is basically the 121B, not the 121B, just the 121. But if you put a ton of armor on it, it's got 300. I believe it has 300 millimeters on your front plate, which is absolutely crazy. I think it's 300 millimeters of effective, actually. So yeah, about 300 millimeters of effective armor. You got about 7 degrees of gun depression over the sides of this thing. Use that, and you have a great tank. Yeah, it's got cupolas, but those cupolas, you easily can hide those cupolas. Only for about a sliver of them can show. And then you also got these weird spaced armor plates right here that can really hide those weak spots right here on the sides, like right here. It's got excellent DPM, like I said. It's got alright pen, but the heat rounds on this thing, you can get it up there pretty high. It's pretty quick, actually, for a heavy tank. It goes 50. It's got decent horsepower per ton. Actually, pretty good accuracy as well as on-movement dispersion. Shell velocity is pretty poor. Got decent view range of 400 and decent hit points at 2,300. So this tank, in my opinion, this is a good tank. It's not strong, but it is also not weak. Oopsie. There we go. Okay. There you go. It's in all honesty, it's better than the IS-7 in my opinion. So yeah. Now shrink that back down. Excellent. Next up, we have the WZ-116. This thing is, I believe, I don't know if it's in the game yet, but it's fairly new, if not in the game yet. This thing is basically the 114 at tier 10. It's got no DPM. It's got not really, I wouldn't say it's bad armor, but it's not great armor. It's so slow. You could probably even go faster backwards if you wanted to, going up hills, because your backward speed doesn't get affected going up hills, believe it or not. So it's got 530 alpha, actually pretty decent pen though for standard rounds at 266. It's got scratch everything I said about this tank, because I didn't notice that they changed it. That it is now an autoloader. It is an autoloading Chinese heavy tank with a 130mm gun. That is why it has such bad DPM. My bad. It's got an autoloader with 1,500 potential damage in 10 seconds, which is pretty good actually. But it's not as good as, say, like a Rinoceronte. But this thing does seem pretty dang good. But 0.4 accuracy, not great at all. Shell velocity is not great either. But it is very slow, like I said. Terrible horsepower per ton. Actually, no, that's pretty good horsepower per ton for how heavy this thing is. It's got 8 degrees gun depression. Let's check out the armor one more time. Use that gun depression. You got 8 degrees. It's not greatest, but then again, you can take a beating with that turret, even though it's gigantic. You got 2,100 health, pretty low for a heavy tank actually, and then you got 400 view range. So I'm gonna put this thing in. Let's put this thing in. I think it'll be good. I think it'll be a good tank. I don't think it'll be bad. All right, now here we go. You guys are gonna be very, very. Oh, am I quiet? Let me see. We go. You guys are gonna be very, very. Oh, am I quiet? Let me see. I'm not quiet, Bomber. You're quiet. My volume is really nice, actually. All right, one sec. I'm not quiet, Bomber. We're good. The 60 TP. This is one of the best tanks in the game, no doubt about it. Some of the best armor. I mean, yeah, you got this thing, but as soon as you angle it a little bit, this thing is golden. And then you use this thing's 8 degrees of gun depression. 8 degrees for a giant Polish heavy tank. I mean, look at this thing. You cannot pen it. You have up to 50. You have like over 2,000 millimeters of effective armor up here, as well as you have some of the best DPM for a 152 millimeter gun. You got 250 pen, which is better than the E100s, I believe. Not fast, it's not mobile at all, but it has insane health. 2,600 health. It's got, as I showed you, the ridiculous armor. Decent accuracy for 152 at 0.36. not the greatest shell velocity, but that's pretty typical for 152, and not the best re-range. But then again, this thing is you got about 390 V range, which is pretty typical for a giant heavy tank like this. Am I too loud now? About 390 V range, which is pretty typical for a giant heavy tank like this. Am I too loud now? I don't think I'm too loud now. All right. Yeah. So, but this thing really has no weak spots on it besides this, and then a little bit of a cupola that it has, but that cupola is also really dang good. So this thing, we have our first broken tank. It's absolutely broken. It's one of the best performing heavy tanks in the game right now. Next up, we have the AMX M454. A couple of years ago, when this thing first came out, this thing was absolutely garbage. I hated it. It was absolutely one of the worst tier 10 heavy tanks in the game, if not one of the worst tier 10s besides the 30B, which is typical. But slowly, this thing has gained a reputation for being one of the best heavy tanks in the game at tier 10. It's also performing really, really well. It's got one of the best turrets in the game. I mean, look at this turret. It's absolutely impenetrable. And then you also got 8 degrees of gun depression. Angle this thing if you angle this thing slightly, you really can't. You expose that weak spot on the cheek. But if you use this thing's 8 degrees of gun depression, I mean, look at that turret. It's just, you cannot pen it whatsoever. Even if you try using APCR, you still got over 1,000, like almost 2,000 millimeters of armor effective on this thing. And it's got a really good gun. It's got a 130 millimeter gun with 2,600 DPM, 560 alpha with 250, and then you have premium AP that has 296 pen, which is pretty dang good. You can pen more things with AP than heat because you don't have the chance of missing through spaced armor. And then its HE rounds have 640 damage, which is not great compared to how much alpha you have at 560 for the AP, but it's still decent. This thing's got 0.32 dispersion, which is absolutely great. It's not the most mobile tank, but it is also not the slowest. It goes 35 for being 86 tons, which is really nice. Yeah, it's got 2,200 hit points. Not bad, not great, but that's pretty good for a French heavy tank. And then you got 390, which is pretty typical for a super heavy tank like this. So this thing a few years ago would have been here when it first came out. Now you got this thing right up and strong. All right, here we go. The BZ-75. This is going to be the new Chinese tier 10 heavy tank with the rocket boosters on them. Rocket boosters, in my opinion, are just so stupid. They're the most stupid things ever. This thing is literally going to be, I'm thinking it's going to be almost like a 60 TP. It's got 8 degrees gun depression, really thick turret, funny pike nose. You got a 152 millimeter gun on this thing. You got 2,500 health, 390 alpha. This is literally a Chinese copy of the 60 TP. But in my opinion, I don't think it's going to be as good as the 60 TP, but we're about to see here pretty soon. I think it's already in the game. I'm not too sure. I'll have to go and check here pretty soon. But I'm not sure if it's in the game. It might be still in testing, but in my opinion, I think this thing is going to be a little bit weaker than the 60 TP because on this thing, you actually have weak spots up here. You can easily pen these cupolas. And then you got the funny rocket boost effect where you have up to 2,000 horsepower because you have 6 rocket boost uses, which is actually pretty good because you have 60 seconds worth of rocket boosting in the battle. But I just find them so stupid. But in my opinion, once this thing comes out, I think it's going to be a strong tank. Not as good as 60 TP, but it's going to be really decent. Chieftain Mark 6. We don't need to talk about this. Crazy DPM, impenetrable turret hold down. You have Hesh rounds. This thing is just broken. And we're also, we're going to also do that to the, where is it? We got the T95 Chieftain, and then as well as the T95 FV4201. I think that, T95 Chieftain FV4201. That one also is going to go in the broken. They're literally the exact same tank on all three, just a little bit different. So yeah, those are all broken. Next up, we have the E100. A couple of years ago, when this thing got its turret armor nerf, this thing was terrible, but they finally buffed its turret back up to 300 millimeters now, and this thing is actually outperforming the mouse, believe it or not. I mean, this thing is absolutely insane nowadays. You use that 7 degrees of gun depression in this thing. You got a gigantic turret that can bounce pretty much anything unless you're loading heat and stuff. When this turret is flat, it becomes butter. But this thing's upper hull is like 500 millimeters effective. And then you also got these really trolly spaced armor plates on the side. And you got that really nice 150 millimeter gun with 246 pen. Pretty decent accuracy at .38 for a 150. But shell velocity is absolutely terrible, and then this thing is sluggish. It is a big, slow 130-ton tank, but it is absolutely joy to play. So I'm gonna put this thing in strong. Next up, we have the what is that? That is the FV215B. This thing is outperformed by the Chieftain, the Super Conqueror. Why not? So you have literally the same hull as a Super Conqueror, same turret, but it's on the back of the tank and doesn't have spaced armor, and you can't side scrape in this. Just why play this tank when you have a Super Conqueror? So yeah. All right, we have the is that the IS-4? Yes, we had the IS-4. The IS-4 stock. You have a literal tier 8. I think it's a tier 7 or tier 8 gun. It's literally absolutely tragic to play this thing. It's got the it's got the D25 TS gun. Terrible ped, terrible anything. You cannot pen anything if you're playing this thing stock, even though it has APCR. It's still absolutely tragic to play this thing stock. But as soon as you get that bigger 122 M62 gun, then you have a fun time in this tank. You got absolutely insane armor in this tank, some of the best armor in the game. It's in my opinion, it's not as good as the IS-7's armor, but you can make it work better than the IS-7's armor because of some of the funny angles you have on this thing. Like, I mean, look at this. You have like over 2,000 effective on this turret if you angle it right, and you also use that 6 degrees of gun depression. You're golden in this tank. You also got some pretty decent DPM at 2,400. It's pretty mobile at 43 kilometers an hour. It's got great health, but its accuracy is really poor, and its shell velocity is not great, especially because this thing has never mind. We're good. This thing, I'm gonna put it in. I feel like it does play better than the IS-7, so I'm gonna put it in strong as well. Now we have the Kranvang. The Kranvang is your absolute hold down meta monster with the autoloader gun. This thing is one of the best performing autoloader heavies in the game, and you tell me why. You have 12 degrees of gun depression. You have a 3-shot, 440 damage gun at tier 10. This is literally like I said, this is the Uday 1516's gun. Just now it has an autoloader, and this thing used to go 60 kilometers an hour, but they nerfed it down to 30. But now they buffed it up to 45, so it's pretty good. but you have no whole armor in this thing whatsoever. You got alright accuracy, but not the best. Your shell velocity is great. Your standard round is APCR, but your heat rounds are lacking in pen, but that really doesn't matter. And then you got really, really good gun depression. 2,000 health, which is not great at all. It used to have 2,200 or something, but they nerfed it to 2,000, so it's not the greatest. But it's also got not the greatest view range, but it really doesn't care what you think about it. It just says, here, I'm going to go hold down. You can't pen my turret, even if you're shooting heat at it, even a Jaegeru. You're not going to pen my turret whatsoever, and you can go die. So, Kranvang, broken. Now we have the M5 Yo. Oh, this tank. It's nothing compared to its Blitz counterpart. It's just, I mean, look at this thing. You got a big old weak bulge Twinkie in the front here. It's literally a Twinkie. I mean, look at these gun elevation angles and stuff. It's so janky. Yeah, it's got 10 degrees of gun depression, but I mean, yeah, you can easily aim for that cupola. It's like a Humpty Dumpty camel hump right there. It's not great. It's got an alright gun, not great pen. It's got your 440 alpha. 0.36 accuracy is pretty good. Excuse me. 40 top speed of 40, which is alright, I guess, for this thing. It's got alright armor besides the whole armor, which you can pen through with anything. 2200 health's not great, not bad. It's got terrible aiming time for American Heavy. This thing, I'm gonna put it in balanced. If it was Blitz, broken, but on here, it's just balanced. Next, we have the cheese, the mouse. Our good old friend the mouse, one of the most OG heavy tanks in the game, and it really hasn't stood the test of time now because you have so much better tanks to play than this thing in the game. You got 8 degrees of gun depression, which is pretty dang good for this gigantic cheese eater. But you see, even if you do angle this thing, like take gun depression, you are easily able to pen through the cheeks, especially when you're loading premium rounds nowadays, and you can even pen through the upper plate sometimes. Like, look at that, upper plate sometimes can become butter, especially for tier 10 tank destroyers nowadays. This thing is absolutely butter, but you can get quite a few bounces with this thing still. It doesn't have the best DPM, nor does it have great pen at all. It's got some of the poorest pen actually for a tier 10 heavy in the game. You got 0.35 accuracy, which is not bad. You got the most health in the game at 3,000. You can actually get this thing up to 4,000 health if you want to with all the modules in the game now. You got 1,850 horsepower. Doesn't mean anything because this thing's 188 tons and it only goes 20 kilometers an hour. So you only got 400 view range, which is pretty good. But yeah, Mouse is gonna put in a good tank. It's not as good as the E100, but it's still good. The Object 257 PA. This thing is literally an Object 257 at tier 10. So this is just literally an IS-3 on better hull and a little bit better turret armor. But other than that, it's really nothing special. It's got pretty bad DPM for a tier 10 heavy. Alright accuracy. It's pretty mobile. You got 2,100 health, which is pretty poor. So it's got APCR as its standard rounds, which is really decent actually. I really like that about this tank. But other than that, it's just literally an IS-3 at tier 10 or an Object 257 at tier 10. So that's gonna go in. It's gonna actually, yeah, it's gonna go. It's gonna stay in balanced. The Object 260. The 260 in Blitz is probably one of the worst tier 10 heavies, but as I say, in PC, this thing is absolutely a beast. You go 60 kilometers an hour. You got APCR as your standard ammo with 260 pen. Great DPM, great accuracy, great on movement dispersion at 0.49 for a Russian heavy tank. Amazing shell velocity. You have decent gun depression for a Russian heavy. You have a little bit less health, but that really doesn't matter. This thing has at one angle on this tank, you have 13,000. Look at that. You have 8,500 effective armor in some spots. And this thing does not care whether it's angling or not. This thing will get ricochets upon ricochets upon ricochets. Even if you angle it like this, you still have a real good chance that you will not pen it. And then it thing doesn't have a weak spot either on the top of the tank, really. I mean, this Cupola right here, you got almost 300 effective on the Cupola, which doesn't affect it at all. So this tank is going to go in Strunk. Now we have the Object 277. This thing is the tier 10 researchable. This is literally the IS-7, just without a pike nose and all the crazy armor angles, but it's got a whole lot more just armor without being effective. But its holes are much weaker because it's not a pike nose and it's more curvy. But it doesn't matter because this thing, you have 5.5 degrees of gun depression, which you can really take advantage of. This thing is quick. It's got decent health, decent accuracy. It's got 340 pen, just your normal M62 122 gun. But it's not as good as the IS-4, but it's also not as bad as the IS-7, so I'm going to put this thing in good. 279E, the most broken tank in the game. Well, one of the most broken tanks. All you have to do is point your armor at your enemies, and they cannot pen you. They legit cannot pen you. And you have no lower plate in this tank. Legit, because you have 4 treads. It's literally an alien spaceship. And then you also have combined that with 5 degrees gun depression. I mean, look at this thing. Even if you angle it, you can't be penned. And look at those side armor angles. Your Cupolas cannot be penned. You have some of the best DPM for a tier 10 heavy at 2,622. A little bit better than 260s. It's got 0.35 accuracy. It's pretty quick for a heavy tank. It's got 2,400 health. I mean, this thing is just absolutely broken tank. Alright, next you have the Object 705A, my favorite tier 10 in the game. I love the Object 705A, although it is very lackluster nowadays in PC. Got really bad DPM at 2,200. Well, I mean, it's not bad, but you also have better things. You got 650 alpha in this tank. Not great compared to other 152s. You have decent pen at 256 for 152, but bad accuracy at 0.42, as well as you're pretty quick, actually, about 40 kilometers an hour for a 100-ton tank. It's got absolutely amazing armor in this thing. It is some of the most busted armor you can get because it's so low ground. And once you use that little tiny bit of gun depression you have, look at this thing. This thing is impenetrable. And you can just bounce off anything on this tank. Even if you're in the back, you still can get some bounces off your rear, which is crazy to think about. It's also got a really good amount of hit points. Not the greatest view range, but it's still decent enough. But other than that, I'm putting this thing in. I'm gonna put it in good. It's not as good as the 260. Next, we have the Object 777 Dynamic. This is the Object 777, just a tier 10, like the 257. This thing is basically a tuned down version of the 277 at tier 10. At tier 9, it would be a tier 9, but this thing's a tier 10 one. It's got your standard M62 440 alpha gun. It's got pretty bad DPM, actually. That's because it's got the tier 9 gun, tier 9 DPM. It's pretty mobile for a heavy tank, especially how big and long this thing is. It's got really decent armor, actually, believe it or not. This is basically a 50 TP prototype at tier 9. It's got decent armor. Sometimes you can pen through the whatchamacallums, the cheeks of the tank, as well as the cupola that it has. It's got a couple cupolas on it. But yeah, this thing is, I'm just going to put it in balance with the 257. Now we have the Object 780. This tank is fun to play. It's literally almost got no lower plate here. Actually, it's because look at this thing. When you're using this thing like this, you can easily bounce this thing because it's like a vacuum cleaner. Because if you shoot down here, it'll suck it in like underneath the tank like a vacuum cleaner does. It's got 7 degrees of gun depression. It's got a 130 millimeter gun with 530 alpha, which feels really nice on this thing. But you do not want to go hold down this tank because otherwise you're exposing your lower plate when you do that because it's so big. But if you just aim face first at your enemies, this thing is a wonder to play, and especially because of how quick it is. It's got 17 horsepower per ton, 45 top speed, 2200 health, which is really good. It has pretty decent, not as good as the AMX M454, but it's still got good DPM, decent pen, and then it's also got decent shell velocity. And yeah, this thing I'm going to put into Strong. Next we have the Panzer 7. This thing is literally a VK7201K, just with the 128. This tank it's nothing special. It's literally a FV4005 if it was German. It's got a 128 gun with 560 alpha, which feels pretty dang good. It's got actually really good shell velocity for 128. It's super sluggish because it's 130 tons. Doesn't have the best armor like the FE4005 because, I mean, if you look at it, you can just easily just pen through these little weak cheek things on the side of it. And then over the front, you only got 5 degrees of gun depression, but then you gotta, once you angle it over that little rim thing you have in the front, you got about 7, but that really doesn't do anything, and you can't really side scrape in this thing because of those weak spots. It's got 2500 health, which is decent, and then it's got 0.35 accuracy, which is also pretty alright, 400 view range, terrible DPM like I said though, but yeah, so the Panzer 7, it's going to be in meh. Alright, the Rinocerante. The Rinocerante, this tank is, it's very hard to tell you about this tank. It's basically the Progetto if it was a heavy tank, but its DPM is one of the worst in the game at 19, well, not the game, but worst tier for tier, because at 1900, and you got a 127 millimeter gun, but look at that, 15 seconds to reload. Even the AMX M454 has better reload than that. You also have legit, basically no armor, because these things right here are flat. Even if you angle them, you still can pen it. Even if you're using its 10 degrees of gun depression, if you do use your 10 degrees of gun depression, this thing's alright, but look up here. You can pen that thing on top of its gun. You got a little nub right here. You can pen that easily. But 2,000 health, pretty poor. When you have standard APCR, 268, that's pretty decent. And then you also have 4-second shell interclip, 0.32 accuracy, which is great. Really good shell velocity. Not the most mobile of heavy tanks. But yeah, I'm going to put the Rinocerante, I'm going to put it in good. It's not great, but it's also not good. Also not bad. Alright. Next up, we have the ST2. Everyone's favorite double barrel heavy tank. the Tier 10 Russian double barrel. This thing is literally an STI, but with a double barrel gun and absolutely insane armor. It's got an IS-4 hull, and then you got 2 guns on this thing that can do up to 880 damage if you fire them both together, which is so much fun to do. You don't have the greatest pen, but it's so much fun to just slap your opponents for 880 with those double barrels, even though both pen, I can't talk. When both pen, you got not the greatest accuracy, but that's because it's double barreled, But you get 2,500 health. You're not the most sluggish tank, but you're not also the fastest tank. At 8 degrees, gun depression feels absolutely great on this thing. I'm gonna put this thing in strong. It's not broken, but it's also not the worst. Super Conqueror. This thing is going straight into, actually, yeah, we're going to put it in broken still. This thing is, it's got ridiculous turret armor. It's got probably the best turret armor in the game because, look at that. You have spaced armor. You have 10 degrees of gun depression. Once you go hold down this thing, look at that. You cannot pen it, even with heat. Heat rounds are not able to pen it. You have an impenetrable turret, almost impenetrable hole even, too, when you hold down. You got great DPM at 2,800, and especially when you're using that Hesh rounds, you have 3,700, which is crazy. 259 pen on your AP, and then 326 on the APCR feels great. 0.32 accuracy, and then you have 0.44 on the move, which is some of the best in the game. But not to mention you got 2,400 health. Not the fastest tank, but it's also not the slowest tank. But overall, this thing's absolutely broken. All right, the T10E5. Such a sad story. This tank has been. It's one of the best noob-friendly tanks in the game, but this thing is just absolutely lackluster nowadays. I just hate it so much. It's got really bad pen, really bad DPM. Actually, no, it's got decent DPM. I think they buffed it recently. We got 0.34 accuracy, 37 top speed, which is pretty sluggish for an American tank. But look at that. Hello to your giant tumor up there. You can pen that thing instantly. I mean, look at that. Even if you hold down, you got these turret cheeks you can pen somewhat, and also this. But you have these little areas down here on the hull where you can actually take a couple bounces, but its hull armor is also pretty trashy, and it's got all right health, but it's nothing too special, guys. So in that case, since I'm very biased against this tank and don't like it, it's going in the meh. T57 Heavy now. This thing is going into broken. You can do everything the 57 AMX50B can do, only better. And then you're almost like a Cranbong. You have 3,200 DPM with a 4-shot autoloader. That is insane. You have the same pen as the E5, as well as you have 340 pen with the heat rounds. And then you go about the same speed as the E5. You got the same dispersion, same shell velocity, all that fun stuff. But look at this. Look at this armor. It is so trolly. You can get bounces upon bounces upon bounces in this thing. I mean, look at that. Look at this thing. You can just get bounces all over this thing. Yeah, the cheeks are really... Looks like you're having an allergic reaction in this tank, but it's still just absolutely amazing. Effective armor is crazy. So yeah, this thing's broken. And we got about 6 more heavies actually. The Type 5 Heavy. This is also one of my favorite tanks to play in Tier 10. But ever since the HE nerf, this thing cannot perform as well as it used to, and especially since they nerfed the damage from 1150 to, I believe, 900. This thing is the biggest tank in the game. It's bigger than the mouse, yes, but it doesn't weigh as much. You got 2,900 health. I mean, just look at this beast. Yeah, you have plenty of weak spots on this thing, but you have 10 degrees of gun depression, and once you use that, you can hide that cupola up there. It's not really that weak, but it's also not that strong. But look at that. You have your Godzilla in this thing. I recommend in PC you mount the 140 gun because you have more pen and more DPM than the big gun. That's if you're not loading heat. I believe if you load heat on this thing, it's still not that great. Oh, they put HESH rounds on it. Thank the Lord. Okay, now the HESH rounds are back on. They have HESH rounds on this tank now, so now it's actually pretty dang good again, in my opinion. So yeah, you got really good armor. You're super sluggish though. Your shell velocity is actually pretty decent for being a giant monster derp gun. Your accuracy is 0.45 with the derp gun, which is pretty typical for a giant derp gun like this. You get the second most health in the game. Get decent view range for a Japanese super heavy, actually. So this thing is going back into good. It's going to go back into good with the mouse. All right, now we are at the VK72. So this is literally the Panzer 7 just with a 150 millimeter gun. So we're going to put this thing in. It's going to go with a mouse as well. All right, next we had the VZ55. Broken. Absolutely broken. You have a 2-shot gun with 0.8 second intraclip. You have I think you have 980 alpha with it. Crazy pen. It's basically got a Super Conqueror turret. And you have 2500 DPM. I mean, look at this thing. It is just a beast. And you have 8 degrees of gun depression. Using that, you are impenetrable. Even that turret, even that cupola, you can really easily bounce. It's really mobile for a heavy tank at 50 kilometers. Not the greatest hit points, but it's got 0.36 accuracy with a 130 millimeter gun. Decent shell velocity for 130. And yeah, it's broken. The WZ-111-5A and the Quillen, but you see the Quillen is different, so we're gonna do the 111-5A first. There we go. This thing is literally the 113, except it's got a pike nose on the front, and then it's got a 130 millimeter gun with 7 degrees of gun depression. I think the 113 also has that, but it's got a much better turret than the 113 because it's got 300 millimeters of armor in the front. It's got about the same exact DPM, but with that 130 gun, it makes it feel so much nicer. It actually is because the same exact speed basically. Sorry, I got an itch in my back here. I got 2,200 hit points, so in my opinion, this thing is literally a better 113. So we're gonna put this thing in the where's the 113? We're gonna put this thing in. Where's my 113? We're gonna put this thing in Stronk. Now, the Quillen has actually a better gun, believe it or not, than the 113 does. The 111-5A. Actually, wait, did they make it the same? I think they made it the same. Again, wow, they changed it. They made it the same, I believe. Wow. On console, they're completely different tanks. Now, let me check. The Quillen. Yep, they're the same tanks now. My bad. On console, they're different. One has actually 530 alpha. All right. Now we have the what is this tank? What tank is that? Oh, we're on the tank destroyers actually. Wow, that was the last heavy tank. Wow. And we're an hour and a half into this video, so we're probably gonna make this is gonna be a 2-hour video. We have the WZ-114 SP2. At first, this tank, as soon as I saw this come in the game, the test stats were absolutely redonkulous about this thing. This thing was going to be some of the best. I thought this thing was going to be one of the best tank destroyers in the game. It was originally supposed to have 850 alpha, and it had almost 3,200 DPM. Yeah, everything else about it stayed the same. Its armor was absolutely ridiculous. Its speed is still the same. Everything about it was crazy. But it's got a turret. It's got a 152 millimeter gun with great pen. But it has no armor whatsoever. I mean, no armor. I mean, look at this. You can pen this thing with Hesh. It's that weakly armored. Even if watch this, even if you use your 7 degrees of gun depression, you still can pen this thing so easily, and that's why this thing it could perform so well. It could be at first it was gonna be broken. Now this thing's just meh. All right, now we have the Foch 155. You have a 3-shot 750 alpha gun for dealing up to 2250. You can get this thing, I believe you can get this thing in the, I'm not sure if you can get it in the Bond shop or if that's the Foch B, but this thing's gun is just so ridiculously good. Because you have also 293 pen with AP and up to 395 on the heat, which is crazy. And you have a 1100 alpha with their HE. This gun is just so good. Yeah, it might have 47-second reload, but it is absolutely worth it to do 2,250. That's some of the highest damage in the game for potential damage in a clip. 0.35 accuracy, that's pretty dang good for this 155 millimeter gun. Top speed of 50. It's a mobile tank, I'll tell you that. 1850 health, which is pretty decent as well. View range is not great, but it's also not bad for a tank destroyer. This tank, I'm going to put this thing in strong. Now we have the Foch B. Literally the Foch 155, just with a 122 millimeter gun. 6 shells. It's got... go back to the Foch B. You got 3100 DPM, 2400 potential damage in this thing. Literally all the same exact stats, but 0.33 dispersion. You know what? This thing's going broken. Not gonna lie. So yeah. Next up, what is that? Is that the? But the Contraccaro Minotauro. You have the Minotauro. The Minotauro is one of those tanks that is hit or miss because, you know, this thing could be really good or this thing could be really bad. But in my opinion, this thing is really, really good. It's literally it's probably one of the best performing tank destroyers at the moment right now. It's got 2,800 DPM, almost 3,000 DPM. That's because you got this. I think you do have the auto reloader on this thing as well. But this thing is just absolutely crazy because you fire this thing. They think that you have fired once, and then you're reloading. But this thing has 5 shells, so you can go boom, 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 boom. Reload for 23 seconds, and you do it all over again. It's got terrible accuracy. It's very, very slow. But this thing, you cannot pen it. You legit cannot pen this thing. When using its 10 degrees of gun depression, I mean, look at that. You have one of the most impenetrable bricks of a tank destroyer. 2,100 health is really, really nice for a tank destroyer. It's got that 130 millimeter gun with that 1,300 shell velocity. Great, everything on it. I'm putting this thing in broken. Now we come to our favorite, everyone's favorite tank to play, the Death Star. That's not the Death Star. That's the Badger. The Death Star. You got 1,150 alpha with AP at 310 millimeters of pen, which is crazy. You can pen literally anything with that shell. Even the mouse, you can pen it in the upper plate. You got alright armor. You got only half a turret. You only got a quarter of a turret with this thing, with only 45 degrees on each side. Actually, that's a quarter of a turret. Ooh, excuse me. You got pretty decent turret armor. You got the whole of FE215B, so you're not really going to do anything there. You have absolutely crazy Hesh rounds. The HE rounds now are deemed useless, but if you pen with these Hesh rounds, you're doing 1750. You can do up to 2200 with this thing, which is you can one shot pretty much any medium at tier 10 or any medium in the game, and then some heavy tanks you can also one shot. Um, it's got terror. It's got actually they buffed the dispersion, so it's now at 0.38, which is really decent actually. Um, it's got 2,000 health, which is all right. Uh, yeah, it's getting really late here, but I'm powering through this. You got 5 degrees of gun depression. Not really anything because you can't really bounce anything on this tank, but it's a great tank, but it's also one that likes to ruin people's days, so I'm gonna put it in good. Next, we got the Badger, broken. Basically, you're the Minotauro. Just you have the highest DPM in the game. I believe now this thing has about 4,000 DPM. I'm gonna check that real quick. Yeah, you can get this thing up to over 4,000 DPM instantly. You got 480 alpha with your 123 millimeter gun. You are not the most mobile, but then you are. But this thing doesn't really need to be mobile because it's a hold down monster. You have 0.29 dispersion, which is crazy. You have 10 degrees of gun depression, 2100 health, impenetrable armor unless you find a magical weak spot on it. And it's just absolutely a busted tank. Now we have the Crap Barn, the FV4005 Stage 2. This thing is literally a Death Star on a Centurion hull with no armor. And yeah, it's going to go in meh. Now we have the Gorilla 15. This is one of my favorite tank destroyers to play. You got big gun. You got no armor. You're quick. Got probably some of the best accuracy in the game at 0.26. But on movement is pretty terrible. You got decent pet at 279. Heat rounds are pretty lackluster here, with only 334 pen, no armor whatsoever. All right, gun depression. I think you can get a little bit more gun depression over the sides. Never mind. But you have the longest gun in the game, which is hilarious because you can legit absorb anything with it. It's that funny. But yeah, the Gorilla 15, I'm gonna put it in good. The Jaegeru, broken. You literally do everything that the E100 does, just better. Yeah, you're a rear turreted tank destroyer, but you have more armor than the E100 does. You have a much better gun. You have more DPM than the E100 does. Way more pen. You have over 300 millimeters on your stand around. You also have the highest pen in the game with your heat rounds at 420 millimeters. And then if you pen with HE, which only has 85 millimeters, and then with the nerfs of HE, you have 1400. It literally goes the same speed as the E100. It's got 2200 health for a tank destroyer, which is the most in the game for a tank destroyer. 390 view range. You have 30.34 accuracy. It's just absolutely insane. Now we have the Object 263B. This is the replacement for the 263. This thing is going into garbage because you are playing with a tier 8 gun at tier 10 that has absolutely nothing going for it. 230 pen for a tank destroyer with 270 on the premium rounds. Absolutely terrible. I played the tier 9, play the 263 over this thing. Yeah, it's quick. Yeah, it's got all right health. It's got all right accuracy. It's got no gun depression whatsoever though, and it's got really bad DPM because of that tier 8 gun. That is why it is garbage. Now the 268 on the other hand, this thing is going to go into good. Let me just check the stats again. I'm just going to make sure I'm making the right choice. Yeah, this thing is going to go into good. It doesn't have the best armor. That's the only thing that's really dragging it from strong, is because this armor is not good. It's got 5 degrees of gun depression. You have that giant cupola right there. Really weak hull. Look at that pike nose, but you have some of the best pen in the game for standard rounds and up to 395 on your heat rounds. Absolutely wonderful. It's pretty mobile too at 48 kilometer top speed. But it's got poor view range as well, so that's another reason why it's going to be held back from strong. The 268 version 4, on the other hand, is going into broken. You have one of the most insane tanks here at the 268 version 4. And I think my stream is lagging a little bit. Oof, I think my stream rate is dropping. Hold on one sec, guys. Let me check my frame rate. Looks like it might be dropping a little bit. Okay, we're good. I think my phone just went auto to 144. That's my bad. 268. Yeah, 268 version 4. You had the one. It's literally a Badger, and a Jaeger mixed into one. You have some of the most heavily armored tank destroyer in the game. You go 50 kilometers an hour in 80-ton tank. This thing is a ramming machine. You got 650 Alpha, 293 pen. It feels like a 705A just as a tank destroyer. But yeah, it's just a broken tank in overall. Next, you got the 268 version 5. This tank is literally a turreted 268. Pretty much you got the same exact armor as 268. Nothing impressive, nothing terrible, but you have 5 degrees of gun depression. 750 Alpha. It's literally like I said, it's just a 268 just with a turret. So this thing I am also going to put into good. Alright, see, my computer is lagging because I'm eating a silly video that is 2.5 hours long now. Let me actually see how long this video is. Yeah, we're on hour and a half now. My bad. I thought we were at 2.5 hours already. The Stridsvang 103B, the Swedish tank destroyer. This thing is a silly boy indeed. You have the best DPM, one of the best DPMs in the game at 3,400. And if you put this thing in siege mode, you have no gun depression or anything when you're not in siege mode. But once you put this thing in siege mode, put this thing on a ridge line. I mean, look at this thing. You can't pen it. You have these funny gates in the front, and they can shred your round apart. They will shred your round apart if you even shoot at it. And then you also can have up to almost 20 degrees of gun elevation, which makes it also basically impenetrable. Because I mean, look at this armor angles. You have crazy pen at 308, which I believe is the best in the game for a standard round. Besides the Death Star, but that really doesn't count. And then you have 350 with your premium APCR rounds, which is pretty dang fun. You got amazing shell velocity at 1500, super good accuracy, really quick tank destroyer. Yeah, this thing is broken. Oh my, is my thing not responding? Oh no. There we go. We're almost done, guys. We're almost done here. Alright. Next up, we have the T110E3. This is the Tier 10 American tank destroyer right after the T95. You literally you can literally do everything the T95 does, except a little bit better. You're faster than the T95. You got a little bit more pen than the T95 does. More DPM, better accuracy, better everything about it. You have literally impenetrable hull armor, especially around the superstructure. But you have a few weak spots on this tank, which can be really exposed. But once you go hold down this thing, it's great. And that cupola, it's really troll to pen. So this thing, I'm going to put this in strong because it's not the most overpowered tank destroyer in the game, but this thing is just a fun thing to have. All right, now we have the T110E4. It's literally the E3, just it has a half rotating turret. It's got a little bit weaker armor. It's a little bit faster, but it's got literally the same gun, so I'm going to put this in good. Alright. Next we have the... Oh, and this is lagging so much. I have too many images. Imagine what's going to happen at tier 8. Man, this is going to be... At tier 8, tier 8 is going to be probably a 4-hour video, to be honest. Okay, whatever. We're good. Alright, whatever. You guys know. It's still there. Now we have the Waffles. Literally, most broken tank. One of the most... It used to be the most broken tank in the game, besides now the Chieftain. You have a 6-shell autoloader with a 128mm gun, infinite pen. You don't have really any armor, but that doesn't matter because this tank is... You don't need it because this thing, as soon as you see your enemy, you just plow all 6 128mm shells in, dealing almost... I believe it was about 2,800 damage in your clip. So it's just ridiculously broken. I mean, look at this thing. Yeah, you have 2,400 DPM, which you can literally kill an IS-7 in one clip. That's how broken it is. All right. Alright, here we go. The WZ113 GFT, and this stream is not a stream, but just my computer is really laggy right now. The WZ113 is probably going to be in the strong category. It literally does everything the Object 268 does, except better because it's got way more armor. It's got a little bit less pen, but that really doesn't matter because you have one of the best guns. I think you have a little bit more DPM than 268 does. Let me make that basically about the same, but you have 0.36 accuracy. You got literally impenetrable hull armor. I mean, look at this thing. Even if you watch when you use that 6 degrees of gun depression in this thing, you got insane hull armor. And those side plates are crazy thick, so you're going to take quite a few bounces from those. So yeah, that thing's going to go in strong. Now we are on to the light tanks. Actually, you know what? Before anything, artilleries are now even more... Well, as if artilleries weren't garbage enough, because only pigs play those. Only scumbags play artillery. But artillery is now deemed useless because of the HE mechanics now. So if it would load. It's taking a little longer than expected, but whatever. All right. Come on. There we go. Excellent. Yeah, it's almost midnight. I believe it's... Oh, we got quarter till midnight, so we got 15 minutes, and then we're done, no matter what. The AMX 13105, literally a bat chat except 10 times worse. A little bit faster. Got worse deep dispersion, just worse everything. So this thing, I'm gonna put it in sucky because it's not garbage, but it's not anything special at all. Now, something I am going to put in garbage, though, is the Manticore. The Manticore is the worst DPM light tank in the game. Has no ammo, nothing going for it. It's just a poo. It's literally just a poo. Alright. And the EBR goes on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. You got a broken tank. Wheeled light tanks, no need to explain about wheeled light tanks. You have broken, you just run in, die, get infinite spotting assist damage, and yeah. The Rhein Panzerwagen, also complete opposite end of the spectrum. Absolutely garbage. No armor, terrible DPM, terrible gun, terrible everything about it. It's just garbage. T100 LT, though, is going to be going straight up into the other end of the spectrum. Absolutely broken. This thing is a pancake. It has some of the most trolling armor, best horsepower per ton in the game, some of the best pen for a tier 10 light tank, and it's just crazy how that thing is just so good still. The WZ-132-1, I'm going to put this thing in balanced. It's your average Joe light tank. It does everything that a light tank does. It's got good armor for a light tank. It's got good mobility, a great gun, good spotting. It's just your average Joe. The Sheridan is going to be sucky because you have the derp gun that is now useless, and then its other gun is just lackluster. It's nothing special. It's big, bulky light tank that really can't get the job done. Alright guys, that is my tier 10 tier list. I hope you guys have enjoyed this video. As I said before, this is all my opinion. This is not based on any facts or anything. This is just my opinion. Comment down below if you think some things should be changed about this. And we will see you guys in the tier 9 list. And until next time, take care, my friends.